To our second episode on the precursors to the Renaissance, also known as the Middle Ages in Italy. So, if you've already looked through your note packet, you want to skip to page 4, and we are only going to be focusing in this episode on one artist, and he's probably one of the most important artists in Western history that you don't know. His name is Giotto. He lived from 1267 to 1337. His entire life he lived in Italy, and this little quote that is in your notes kind of typifies who this man, how he thought of himself. He says, "I am he who through whose merit the lost art of painting was revived, whose hand was as a faultless as it was as compliant. What my art lacked nature herself lacked. To none other it was given to paint more or better. But what need is there for words? I am Giotto, and my name alone tells more than a lengthy ode." So if that doesn't say narcissism and how he thought of himself, I don't know what does. So he was born near the city of Florence, in the city-state of Florence. He starts his artistic career as a kid drawing sheeps on rocks. And he is discovered by a famous artist of the day named Cimabue. He is an artist we saw in the last episode who did the altarpiece that we looked at in the Do Now. And he instantly recognizes the genius of this young man. Giotto was one of the first artists to really truly break beyond the Byzantine style, and he painted what he observed in nature. And that's going to be one of the reasons why he's such a key foundational artist in art history. And we are going to really only focus on his monumental work known as the Arena Chapel. The Arena Chapel actually goes by another name. It goes by the Scrovini Chapel. It's created in the city of Padua, Italy, which is a little southwest of Venice by about 25 miles. And it is built, and let's bring it up here. It is built by a gentleman named Enrique Scrovini. And Enrique Scrovini, his family was in the business of usury. And usury is a business that in the Bible is considered a sin. And what usury was, it was the business of lending money and charging interest on that money that people are borrowing from you. So Enrique's father started this business. They made a ton of money on it. He was kind of hated by a lot of the people in the city of Padua, and Enrico wants to essentially show God his piety. So he has this chapel built, and originally it was built adjacent to the palace that the Scrovinis had built for themselves. And it also gets the nickname the Arian Chapel because it's built semi on top of and next to a Roman arena. And you can actually see some of the bricks over here that are very worn to the right hand side of remnants of the Roman arena that's left behind. So it's a two-story building. It was a private family chapel. Was not meant for congregants from the town to come to, and pretty plain on the outside. If you look at the door, one simple entrance. The archivolt, which are that stone arch that is in above the door, it's very reminiscent to the archways that we saw in the Great Mosque of Cordoba and also the Dome of the Rock. Now, I'm not sure of the connection there, but to me, that might be a little bit cross-curricular or cross-cultural. But when we go inside, the size of the building, it looks misleading from the photos, and it's actually much taller and much bigger in person. So let's start. So in the red here, we've already talked about all this, the background information on why it was created, where it was created, who it was created for. Right, you want to add this to your notes. So that's the Arena Chapel, 1303, made out of brick. The outside, at least, the inside is going to be fresco. Fresco is that plaster that is placed on the walls while it's wet. You paint into the plaster or onto the plaster, and then when it dries, the artwork literally is one with the wall. Also here, if you want to look at the PowerPoint, there's a couple of videos that go into a little bit more detail on the Arena Chapel itself. So here we are. We are literally at the front door staring into the chapel. You can see on the very far end is an altar on either side along the floors and along the walls there are some pews. But what we're going to focus on is what is on either side of the walls, these stories being told in registers. And besides, the over kind of overwhelming imagery that you see here. The other overwhelming thing that should pop out to you is the use of blue. So the fact that this Enrico Scorvini felt so bad and was so worried about going to hell because of his family's business of usury, he spent an exorbitant amount of money using and allowing Giotto to use the color blue on the interior here. This would have been mind blowing to people of the day because they had never seen this extensive use of blue before. Um, so remember, blue is coming from lapis lazuli, which is coming from the Middle East, so a very expensive uh, color to use, usually reserved just for Mary. But what we see here is they first off use it to create a sky, a nighttime sky on the ceiling with the stars. And then we also see it decorating the backgrounds of all the images. That's one of the ways that Giotto was so innovative. He's taking these religious images that we're used to having a gold background and he's placing them in the real world. So that's what's one of the most innovative aspects of Giotto and how important he was. That idea of coming back to humanism, that idea of man is the measure of all things and that life on earth is worthy of portraying in art. So we're going to start our journey of the Arena Chapel taking a look at that archway that's by the altar. So if we open it up here, in the top we have an image of God. So that's not Jesus, that is God up there. And it is God, and he is talking to the angel Gabriel that is on his right. And then we see a scene right down below, right at the top of the arch, where Gabriel is speaking to Mary, all right? And she has light kind of shining down on her in this interior setting. Now, they're separated by the arch, but the scene is, originally meant to be together. That's known as the Annunciation. So we don't see a gold background. We don't see those Byzantine kind of motifs that we're used to. We have this image of this woman in a room, in a home that would have no, it looks contemporary to the Renaissance at this point, or the early Renaissance. It doesn't really look like it would have 2,000 years ago, but it's an interior scene, no gold, and she has just been told that she is pregnant with God's child. Now, on the opposite wall, so this is the wall right above the entranceway, we see the Last Judgment. So you want to hit pause on this slide, take notes on that is in red. So this is a very orderly Last Judgment scene. We've got Christ being held up in a full-body mandorla. He is right above the cross, all right, the cross that he has risen off of during the resurrection. We see these orderly rows, almost like military units on either side above Jesus, of angels. To Jesus' direct right and left, we have the 12 disciples, and directly next to Jesus' right is St. Peter. And remember, St. Peter is important because he is the one that will start the Catholic Church. All right, he's got the keys to heaven, which are essentially the church that Peter will start after Christ dies. And then to Christ's right, you have those that are saved, those that are worthy of entering heaven. Those to Christ's left is that ghastly scene of those being dragged, their souls, into hell. And you even have a blue beast-like creature that is eating the souls. And Enrico Scrivini even has Giotto paint himself into the image. So I want you to take a minute and think, well, where's he at? Where's he at? Even hit pause if you have to and take a guess. So after you hit pause here, or after you've hit play again, Enrico Scrivini is down here. He is essentially on his knees giving a model of the church to these women known as the Three Marys, who are going to take it up to God as his offering to show his piety. And if you look, he is on God's right side. So he is essentially saying, look, through this good deed, I am getting to heaven. A little bit closer there. If you look over these people that are hanging from a tree, that was usually the death given to prostitutes or usurers, which are seen as some of the most sinful of crimes and occupations. You also want to write down this information. So Giotto's art is showing this growing interest in the natural world. It will start with him and a couple other pre-Renaissance artists, and it's going to flower as it impacts the artists at the early Renaissance and high Renaissance. And these artists are beginning to depict human emotion in their work, which is the influence of humanism. and not this very flat, very forward imagery that we saw starting in early Christian art, saw that again in the Middle Ages, saw it in Byzantine art, and then saw it in a lot of the Gothic art that we looked at. Except for the Radigan Pietà, that did have imagery, but it was not necessarily very realistic. So the first image we're going to start out with is if you were to go back to that interior image of the church, the chapel itself, it starts out with images on the top registers of Mary's family, her parents, Mary's life, Jesus' life and his teachings, and then the final row towards the bottom, the final register is the Passion of the Christ. So at the very top is an image that is not in the Bible, but it is an image of Mary's parents. And in the Middle Ages, there is this passion to learn about Christ's family, and they weren't written about or talked about in the Bible. So what happens is you have a book put together called the Golden Legend, and it fills in a lot of these narrative gaps about Mary's life and her parents' life. So what we see here is Mary's parents, Joachim and Carol, who could not conceive. They couldn't have children, and they were looked down upon by the members of Jewish society. And they had both prayed to God, and again, they're both also older, they're in advanced age. They pray to God, and almost at the same time, an angel speaks to them. Jacob when he's out in the field, and Carol while she is at home. And the angel says, "You will be pregnant with a very special child, or you will have a child that is extremely special." And what happens is, once the angel speaks to them, they both run towards each other. And that's what we're seeing here. They're seeing each other for the first time after the angel spoke to them, and they are embracing. So what's revolutionary about this? You have the blue background. You have this emotional, tender moment of two people kissing. We haven't seen that before, and that is revolutionary. And again, that is what Giotto is known for, and that's what he is showing us. He's showing us real emotion, real people in a real moment. This story here is of Mary's life. This is the story of after the Annunciation happens and Mary finds out that she is pregnant with God's child. She speaks with a rabbi, and that rabbi essentially tells her, "You will be married to the man that presents you with a flowering rod." So these men here are all lined up, all relatively young, and they are presenting this rabbi with a rod, and none of them have a flowering rod. But Joseph's there. He is towards the back. He is older, he's bearded, and his rod has a flower on it, and he also has a nimbus that gives away that he is who he is. Here is the marriage of Mary and Joseph, and we can even see one of the guys to the left-hand side is upset. He's breaking the rod. Joseph is holding his rod in his hand. It has a little lily sprouting from it that means purity, and again, that's kind of also a symbol of Mary, purity. We often will see that as well, especially in the Northern Renaissance. This is an image of King Herod, and he orders the firstborn male child of all Jewish people in this city to be killed because he hears that the Son of God has been born. So this is when Mary and Joseph will escape to Egypt, and that's what we're seeing here. This the killing of all of these babies. We know that the man in the center would have had a spear or some type of knife as he is pulling away this child from his mother. These mothers are grief stricken. It's a very sad scene. You've got men here who aren't doing anything and they're almost embarrassed because they're not doing anything. So very emotional, very dramatic and sad scene. All very different than what we saw in the Byzantine mosaics and also from the illuminated manuscripts of the Gothic and Middle Age era. Here we see our first adult image of Egypt that I've shown you, or of Egypt, of Jesus that I've shown you. And this is after the Last Supper. And this is Jesus being betrayed by Judas. Judas is coming up and about to give Jesus a kiss on the cheek. And that is what will alert the people there to arrest him that who Jesus is. And what you have is Jesus portrayed completely in profile. And that idea of portraying someone in complete profile like that was a place of honor because that's how Romans would depict their emperors on coins in profile like that. So he is very kind of solemn while you have Judas kind of reaching up with a shadow on his face about to kiss Jesus and betray him. Now, this is the image that's the most important to know. It's the most famous of all of the images in the Arena Chapel, and its size here is a little. What's the word I'm looking for? It doesn't seem as big as it is, but it's 6 feet by 6 feet, so that's pretty large. And what you have here is a Christian scene known as the Lamentation. And the Lamentation is when Jesus is taken off the cross. And it's you're seeing the real emotion with real people in a real space here. So some of the innovative techniques are you've got these angels that are also showing emotion. They're swooping up and down in different ways. The emotion in Mary's face as she stares at her dead son, whose lifeless body is just lying there. You've got Mary Magdalene at the bottom holding on to Jesus' feet. And you also have a scene that is considered its own space. We have a foreground with the two people who have their backs to us. We have the midground where Jesus is, and then we have the background where the angels are and where that tree goes back to. And if you look up to where the tree is, he's using lines to draw our eye, that sloping line, that diagonal line, to take our eye to the main point of the scene, which is Jesus and his death. So that is something that artists were going to begin to use as the Renaissance continues, using diagonal lines to draw your eye to that most important part of the painting. And what do we call that? We call that perspective. So you want to hit pause. You want to write down all of the things that I have told you right here. This is again just one last scene of the last or of the Arena Chapel. You see the Last Judgment there. If you were to walk out the front doors, and again, each of those scenes is 6 feet by 6 feet, so very large, very tall, very long building. And again, at the very top, the registers start out with the life of Mary's parents, Mary's life, Jesus's teachings, and then finally it ends with the Passion of Christ. Okay, so this is the only piece really that you have to know from the precursors to the Renaissance or medieval Italian art. It's an important piece. It's a piece that has a lot of parts to it, and it's important to know the context behind it. But that's it now. We're going to be getting into the Renaissance proper with the Northern Renaissance in our next episode, and we will see you then. That'll be up there tomorrow. Bye, guys.